I'm going to have a look at a bit of Macbeth revision now. Right, now we're going to look at a bit of context. The context of Macbeth encompasses several historical, cultural, and literary aspects that contribute to a deeper aspect of the play. And it's actually quite interesting when you look at the certainly the political stuff that was going on at the time, but we'll get to that in a minute. Here are some key contextual elements. Historical context. Macbeth was written and first performed around 1606. We always say around with Shakespeare stuff. During the reign of King James I of England, the 6th of Scotland. And James had a strong interest in witchcraft and the supernatural, and that's reflected in the play's themes, the portrayal of the witches, etc. The play draws upon the historical figure of Macbeth, who was a real Scottish king. However, Shakespeare takes some very significant liberties with the historical account to create a more dramatic and engaging narrative. The political climate as context for this play is really quite interesting because the themes of political ambition, regicide, the consequences of a tyrannical ruler, they're really relevant at this point. Transition of power and concerns about the legitimacy of rulers were really significant. James I had only been on the throne about 3 years when this play came out. His Queen Elizabeth I had died in 1603, and James was not her son. So there was all sorts of concerns about legitimacy of power. It's also really interesting that this is a Scottish play because James I, or King James I, or the 6th, was Scottish. So he succeeded Queen Elizabeth to the English throne in 1603, but he was already King of Scotland. So this event is often referred to the union of the crowns. He had a personal connection with Scotland. It's relevant to Macbeth. He was born in Scotland. He had a strong interest in his Scottish heritage. And this interest influenced his patronage of Shakespeare's acting company, the King's Men. So the idea of legitimacy and succession that is in the play are also really relevant to the context of the time. The people watching it would have been really aware. So the rightful succession was critical concern to James's reign. His own ascension to the English throne raised questions about the legitimacy of monarchs, the stability of the monarchy, all sorts of things. Macbeth explores the consequences of regicide and the impact of a ruler's illegitimate rise to power. The play's themes of ambition, betrayal, political intrigue resonate with anxieties surrounding James's succession. The play reflects the broader political fears of treachery and rebellion. James faced multiple attempts on his life and several conspiracies during his rule. The Gunpowder Plot, for example. And all of this had a profound impact on the political climate. Macbeth features a theme of treason and betrayal, with characters plotting against the rightful king. And the play's portrayal of Macbeth's tyrannical rule and his eventual overthrow mirrors the anxieties of political instability and treason. The divine right of kings was something that James I was very, very into. So this is a political theory that asserted that a monarch's authority was granted by God. It's a belief that kings were accountable only to God and not to their subjects. And this play touches on that idea a little bit, as well as the consequences of a ruler's abuse of power. Macbeth's descent into tyranny and chaos that follows illustrate the dangers of a ruler who acts without regard for the divine authority or moral principles. As with a lot of Shakespeare's plays, the Jacobean beliefs and superstitions were very important contextually because people in these audiences believed in witches and magic and the supernatural. So these beliefs were very prevalent in Jacobean England. The play capitalises on these beliefs with the portrayal of the three witches, the prophecies, and the way that Macbeth behaves around that. Also, the ghost as well. So James himself wrote a book called Demonology, essentially, in which he discusses his beliefs in witchcraft and provides instructions on how to identify and prosecute witches. I would say persecute, but anyway, but this is the cultural context which influences the depiction of the witches in the play. Tragedy as a genre. So while this is a genre, it's also part of the context of the play. So Macbeth is a tragedy, and it was really popular at Shakespeare's time. So they typically involve the downfall of a noble protagonist due to a flaw or fatal error in judgment. Macbeth's unchecked ambition and moral decline are those exemplify those elements, and people loved it. People were very into this as a genre, especially in Shakespeare's time. Again, we have to take into account the fact that this was a theatrical performance written for an audience. It was not written to be read, as we tend to read it today when we're studying it. We sit down and we read it. It was written to be a play. It was written to be seen and to be performed, and to be performed in front of people from all sorts of different social background. The penny seats at the Globe Theatre cost a penny, which was you could buy a loaf of bread for a penny. So it's like being able to go and see a play for £1.30 about. The play's dramatic and violent scenes, as well as the exploration of psychological turmoil, would have really resonated with those audiences. Macbeth is a really good example of where you can see Shakespeare being inspired by other influences. So he's drawing influence from various sources, especially Raphael Holinshed. Can't get his name right. I've done this several times. Holinshed's Chronicle of England, Scotland, and Ireland. This provides historical accounts of Scottish kings and events, which he, as we've already said, took wild liberties with. But anyway, and it also reflects some classical tragedy. So if you're looking back at the Greeks, Sophocles, Euripides, looking at those fate, prophecy, supernatural elements there. For more Shakespeare revision, subscribe to this channel. There'll be new videos out every week, and check out the playlists linked below.